Fundamentally, mindfulness tells us to drop the possibility and even the desirability of eliminating the mind's activity or the body's sensations and feelings. On the contrary, you will come to see that it is very possible and highly liberating to embrace the full content of the body and mind. If we do not welcome even the painful and difficult things that we experience, then we must reject them, wishing that they were not there, that we did not have to feel whatever we find difficult. Thus begins suffering, anxiety, and emotional stress. By embracing the fullness of our experience, we gain personal power through our lives. Otherwise, we put ourselves in the difficult position of trying to gain power over life, a pursuit ultimately doomed to failure. Don't wonder, what shall I do about my life? Rather ask, what shall I do with my life? The mental, emotional, and even physical discomforts we experience can become the medium through which we examine and ultimately heal and regenerate both ourselves and the outer world. No program for self-help, or social, political, or economic improvement for that matter, will make significant gains if it does not include fundamental changes in consciousness. Without such change, we can only rearrange the elements we face. We cannot get beyond them. We can learn to accept problems and difficulties as gifts to work with. The problem-solving mode of self-help, so popular today, often seeks shortcuts to get around or beyond our problems. We rarely get to go into our problems, to face our difficulties squarely. We want to ignore these forces as if they had no substance, no message or meaning to give us. But these forces are real, and we cannot ignore them without cutting off a part of ourselves. To push on toward our goals despite our feelings will serve us no better than to dwell endlessly on our bad parts or our mistakes of ill fortune. Instead of either of these alternatives, we can find a middle way, one where we choose to face ourselves as we are. In this way, we understand each interaction, each event of life as being exactly what we need for our growth at that moment. When used in this manner, the thoughts and emotions engendered by the events of life, whether good or bad, have no power over us. In fact, they become the very tools with which we work. When you meditate, allow each sensation, thought, or emotion to arise as a part of your consciousness. Judge nothing, accept everything, exclude nothing. Let go of attachment to the needs of your personal self, for safety, love, comfort, and so forth, and ally yourself instead with your authentic needs, the needs of your soul. When you examine them, you will find that the needs and desires of your personal self, things such as security, good reputation, physical comfort, and good health, are often the very barriers you face in creating or having all you might hope for. If, for example, I have made a serious mistake and I try to hide it to protect my job or reputation, or so as not to appear foolish, the denial, not the mistake itself, becomes an obstacle in my path. My personal self's need to look good stands in opposition to my soul's need to learn and to experience peace. The denial becomes painful. It hides away a part of myself, telling me of my inadequacy. Its continued existence creates tension in my body and mind. If I wish to serve my soul, I must let go of my denial and embrace the foolish part of myself that made the mistake to begin with. In my meditation, I can allow the feelings conjured up by my mistake just to lie there, fully felt, but without judgment, and without even giving the feelings a name. The same holds true for the pleasant. We can become addicted to and intoxicated by the desirable. If, instead of making a mistake, I have done some good deed and have become the object of admiration and honour, the pleasure of that may captivate my mind. I could simply experience the pleasure of the moment and then let it go. Or I could dwell on how fine I must appear, imagine future honours, and allow my head to swell with pride. Some of the fundamental effects of this intoxication resemble the effects of denial. In both cases, I lose myself, forgetting my true nature. In both cases, I concern myself more with my appearance than with my actual state. And in both cases, I look for control over pleasure or pain, where I can have no real control. This attempt to control lies at the root of suffering. Ultimately, we want happiness, and that means that we want to give up our suffering and live in higher consciousness. But we cannot give up what we do not have. In order to let go of our difficult feelings, we must first accept them. We do this work in meditation. We use meditation as the technique to feel ourselves fully. As this occurs, healing comes spontaneously and rapidly, and transcendence beyond our limited self begins. This magic results from nothing more than our attentiveness. When we meditate honestly, we see many things about ourselves that we may not like. If the contents of our minds were somehow projected onto a screen for public view, I think we would all suffer embarrassment and shame. In our minds, we lust after one thing and fear another. We greedily want to keep the pleasure coming while we shun the unpleasant. We all have moments of anger and pride. We all have our secret desires. Mindful meditation focuses our awareness on this everyday mind of ours and begins to separate out our reactions, positive and negative, from the sensory events that preceded them. we begin our practice and our search for peace, purpose, and prosperity with an awareness of self, our bodies, feelings, and thoughts as they are at this moment. We then allow that awareness to continue as we become especially aware of our breath. Holding to the awareness of breath, we watch the endless parade of sensations and thoughts and our reactions to them. Slowly, behind all the sensations and thoughts, we become aware of consciousness itself. Here we examine this I we have been so protective of, so identified with. Eventually, the sense of a separate, reactive self disappears, and we reach the natural state, the state of peace, unsullied by desire and not attached to a false sense of self. When we experience emotional or physical trauma, defended areas of dread may remain hidden away within our minds or bodies. We recoil when we get too close to one of these secret places where fear has taken hold. Meditation gives us the power to examine these places, to see them clearly. Meditation acts like a torch to illuminate the dark recesses of our minds. Through our meditation, these stored and hidden feelings, these dark areas that can cause so much suffering, can become the means of our release. Whenever you feel discomfort, consider it as a signpost pointing directly toward a defended area. Honestly, follow the path that sign indicates, and you will rediscover an old wound. Put all your attention there, for although this may seem to fly in the face of instinct, whatever we experience with clarity and directness cannot hurt us. We need simply to change our perception. We need to embrace, rather than flee, our wounded, neurotic self if we wish to find the enlightened self within. We should not allow the recesses of our minds to harbour dark, unexamined, unassimilated bits of consciousness. The possibility of being whole and healed does not exist for us as long as we reject a fragment of ourselves, no matter how ugly or fearsome it may seem. Our unassimilated parts require defences, so that no one, ourselves included, shall see them. And defences prevent satisfying contact with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. Emotional and physical discomforts, including injuries and diseases, show us where to look to find the defended parts. It is here, face to face with our pain, that we do the work of meditation, the work of healing and becoming peaceful, the work of unflinchingly studying the self, whatever we may find. This work of awareness will never end, no matter how long we maintain our meditation practice. Mindfulness, after all, does not try to change, but simply to allow. It exposes to our consciousness all things, making no distinction between the delightful and the grotesque, and gives us a way to live with ourselves in peace. And yet this brings up a sensitive and critical issue. At what point might we choose to transcend our feelings, to forget the past, simply to move on? Or might that never be appropriate or even possible? I believe we must again tread a middle path where we can develop great awareness of all that we contain and all that we experience, even as we actively choose to create and experience something new. On one side of this very narrow middle path, we run the risk of falling into using meditation only to relax, as a way of letting go of discomfort while failing ever to let go of its cause. In doing so, we could condemn ourselves to an endless repetition of the cycle of pain and release, pain and release. On the other side of our middle way, we face the possibility of using powerful techniques to forge ahead, to change our inner state without ever healing or releasing the old fears and patterns. On this side, we run the risk of creating still another, albeit more subtle, form of denial. The middle path I recommend takes us beyond simple awareness. By combining mindfulness with transformation practices, it gives us a blend of both peace and power. On the middle path, we develop both a sensitively aware mind and the ability to choose, when appropriate, to let go and move on. On the middle path, we shall make all of the psyche available to meditative examination, and we will free ourselves from old, unexamined limitations, while we go ahead and create new mental and physical patterns. Combinations of meditation practices, including breath control, posture, focus, mantra, affirmations, and visualization will prove enormously effective. In ego, we indulge ourselves, yet we hide from ourselves, from our old wounds, from the truth, and most especially from our own wisdom. In ego, we don't know our true identity, and we may feel alienated, empty, and inauthentic. In ego, we experience fear, anxiety, and negative aggressive states, and find ourselves dominated by sexual desire and other appetites. We can't ignore these drives without the risk of fragmenting ourselves, of splitting into so-called acceptable and unacceptable parts, and yet indulging these fears and appetites never leads to lasting satisfaction. We cannot compensate for low self-esteem by catering to our inexhaustible appetites. Acting out of ego, we can never realize fulfillment. On the middle path to peace, we can recognize and honor all of this. Even as we do practices designed to take us beyond the ego, we will remain aware of its urges. The ego and the urges that have attached to it will not disappear through spiritual effort. Striving cannot get us past striving. We can, however, come to know the ego and through our meditation and yoga practices, access our true self. The pursuit of peace is our foundation, a first stage that we will never complete, even as we proceed on to the subsequent stages of the success of the soul. We need to renew our peacefulness constantly, for each moment brings new challenges to our peaceful state of mind. We live in the midst of an unending stream of threats to peace. We experience desire and disappointment, old age and decay, loss and death. We have our likes and dislikes, our senses of uncertainty and imperfection, our cares and ambitions. We ought to face our desires squarely, recognizing, as egocentric beings, our extreme vulnerability to the effects of desire. As children, no matter how well-intentioned our parents may have been, we did not, could not, get enough approval and love to set us free of desire permanently. We have reacted by superimposing a coherence upon ourselves, a false persona that protects us from the effects of exploitation or lack of interest. We've become isolated within that false self and have created a fantasy of our own perfection, an unrealizable false self. We sacrifice everything in pursuing it. We want nothing so much as the fulfillment of that ideal, or sometimes just the appearance or the illusion of fulfillment. For example, a girl who grows up without unconditional love and unlimited attention from her father might pursue endlessly a fantasy of her perfect mate, or might drive herself harshly at sports or work to get her father's approval. These psychological consequences have become well known and understood. But unfortunately, we do not understand so well the possibility of peacefulness, despite a lack of perfect love and complete fulfillment. The meditative way teaches us that we can transform our suffering into fascinating challenge. I do not suggest that we can live a life without difficulties. Rather, I recognize that difficulties form an essential part of life that we can and must learn to work with. We meditate for many reasons: relaxation, health, peace of mind, and so on. But honest, meditative awareness leads to only one conclusion. We do not require less stress or more love or better health in order to find freedom and peace. Rather, our peace comes from a recognition that our soul welcomes these challenges. The soul knows, as our personal self hardly ever does, that these challenges are the classrooms of life. In the end, all these words can do you very little good. Only the practice of meditation, sincere and devoted practice, can turn these intellectual ideas into something palpable and useful. If you intend to bring about an end to the suffering, to build a lasting peace founded on freedom from desire, rather than on a rickety foundation of temporarily satisfied desires, then begin now with your meditative practice.